You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hi. My guest today is the lovely Amanda Gurman. Amanda is an advocate for normalizing motherhood and the host of the Honest as a Mother podcast. You might recognize the name of her podcast from listening to it, or because you saw that I was a guest on her podcast and listened to that. Anyway, Amanda lives in Ontario, Canada, with her husband and 2 children, Connor and Scarlett. And she's also an avid Real Housewives of New Jersey fan. That's obviously not part of her actual bio, but I just love it so much about her, so I wanted to share. Anyway, Amanda is wonderful. This is such a raw, vulnerable, and honest conversation about postpartum rage, anxiety, depression, and the toll that bringing humans into the world can take on your marriage. Amanda shares the intimate details of coping with her mental health, her idea versus reality of what motherhood would look like, setting up boundaries, and working through her own childhood trauma to be the amazing parent she is today. So here she is. As always, stay tuned after for my final thoughts. Hey, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I just want to get right into it with you. I think we have a lot in common, a lot of similar things going on with postpartum and kids and momming and podcasting and all of it. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I would agree and right back at you. I'm very excited. I've been looking forward to this all day, to be honest.
All right. So I think given the nature of what we're going to talk about, I think we just have to give that universal disclaimer for both of us and say we love our children and we love our husbands, but...
Yeah, exactly. You know,
right?
Yeah, like really no explanation even needed. Like we obviously love our children, but yeah, like we just sometimes need a minute to vent about how hard this really is.
Yeah. All right. So you have 2 kids, 2 C-sections. Talk to me a little bit about your postpartum experiences, one versus the other, everything that sort of made it such that we're sitting here today. That's a big question. I know. I know. Huge. A huge question. It sounds simple, but it's really not. And I know it's not. So take it however you want.
Oh gosh, of course. So yeah, honestly, there were 2 very different experiences. And now, being that further into my motherhood journey, I'm thankful for them. But yeah, when I had Connor, it was like, the typical I was ready. I was ready to have my son. I was going to be, the best mom and make baby food and breastfeed exclusively. And I was going to we were going to go for those beautiful walks and baby yoga classes.
Yeah.
And, I was going to be that mom.
No cocomelon whatsoever.
Heck no.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't even really think that I ever really even put screen time into a thought process because I always felt like we were going to just be so busy doing other things. But so when Connor came into the world, like my postpartum experience was difficult. I had a really rough recovery from my first C-section. And I actually also was diagnosed with pups rash. So I don't
Mhm.
know if you know what that is, but it is literally, I was covered in hives
Yeah.
from like my C-section scar, like down, like all down my legs, like everywhere. I
Mm.
was just covered in hives.
I just interviewed, actually, sorry to cut you off, but I just talked to Lena of New Mama's podcast,
Mhm.
and she had the same experience, and that was the first I'd ever heard of it. But it sounds
Yeah,
awful.
it is awful. And honestly, surprisingly, a lot of people say like, oh, they've never heard of it. So I certainly had never heard of it.
Yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know what it is, it was like the way the doctor explained it to me was because when you have a baby, you're obviously a woman, and I had a son. Did this person have a son?
Yes.
Yeah. So he explained it like my body was almost like reacting. So when you give birth, I guess their like fetal cells go kind of like are dispersed through your body, and my body was having like an actual allergic reaction to
Mm.
like his male DNA.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
So if that wasn't a warning sign,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what was.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So yeah, just, it was like I always say I feel like motherhood slapped me in the face because it was like I was trying to heal. I
Mm.
have these horrible hives, but somehow I have to get up 4 or 5 times a night and feed this tiny human who he cried literally nonstop.
Mhm.
And I finally, like around the 3 month mark, kind of sort of figured it out a little bit. And then, of course, that lovely 4 month sleep regression.
Mm. Mhm.
I know, don't you just cringe?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
hearing that word.
Yep.
But so around that time, Connor started doing this thing where like, some babies go through that thing where you like can't put them down. If I put him down, he would like instantly wake up.
Mhm.
And that just went on for months. And then I was so miserable. And I remember like thinking like, how did this happen? Like I had these really high expectations for motherhood, and this is not what I wanted. Like when am I going to sleep again? When am I going to have 5 minutes to myself again? And I just remember my stepmom had come over one night and I was showing her what he was doing and how he wouldn't sleep unless he was with me. And she said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I literally rock him until he's out cold and then I can put him down. But as soon as he like rolls over or something and wakes up, he wants me again." So she said, "So don't do it." And I was just like, "What do you mean don't do it?" Which kind of led me into some sleep training. But I just remember that moment was really substantial for me because it was like, oh, I don't have to be this mom that I think I have to be.
Mm. Mhm.
So as hard as it was also this really big pivotal point where it was like, okay, so I'm going to figure out what I don't like in motherhood, and somehow I'll figure out, what kind of mom I do want to be through all of the things I don't like. And
Mm.
that worked out pretty well,
Yeah.
until I had Scarlett, and her pregnancy was really hard. I bled a lot through her pregnancy.
Oh my goodness. That's
It
scary.
was it was very scary. It was like it's basically like a blood clot on your placenta, and so every once in a while, like it would just kind of you would just bleed,
Mm.
and it was like quote unquote normal, but every time it happened, I had to go to the hospital to be sure like I wasn't having a miscarriage,
Oh my
and it
god.
was yeah, it was just like a lot of stress.
Yes.
And we
Wow.
moved.
Mhm.
I mean, we moved into our home that we're in now, which I love. It's my home, but still a stressful situation.
Mhm.
So, yeah, when I had Scarlett, I actually just really and truly had all these, again, horrible expectations where I thought I was going to be the best mom because I had already done this. Like, I had already done sleep deprivation, I had already battled, breastfeeding, and that didn't work out with Connor. So, I did formula feeding. So I was already kind of in the mindset of, you're just going to give up breastfeeding if it's not working. Like, you're not going to stress yourself out.
Mhm.
You've done the sleep deprivation thing, and it just didn't work out that way.
Mm.
It was more like, you forget about the toddler that you have with you when you've
Yeah.
been up all night with the screaming baby. All of a sudden, when the toddler's at you at 6 a.m. and you just went to sleep, you're like, oh yeah, like I have to do something with you.
Right.
And that was a very hard realization. So when my husband went back to work, it was just a lot of the same old. Like I really wasn't sleeping at night. And then I was up with Connor all day. Connor also transitioned into not napping when
Mm.
Scarlett was like 4 months old.
Oh my God.
So, I think we don't respect that first pregnancy enough, and we
Yeah.
don't give, the postpartum period to your first baby enough respect, really and truly, because you can't sleep when the baby sleeps when you have multiple children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess I didn't think about that again. I think I just had these like really outrageous expectations that I was just gonna like I guess somehow function without sleep, or I thought Connor was gonna let me sleep for 4 hours a day. Like I don't really know what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then when I had at 4 months postpartum, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression, and specifically postpartum rage, and that was scary. I don't know if anyone listening can relate, but like rage and mom just didn't go hand in hand to me. It was like I was really ashamed of that
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis, and I was really struggling with anger. Like everything made me angry. I resented my husband. I One of the red flags for me was when my daughter would like wake up in the night for a bottle, she would make me like so unbelievably angry that I had
Mm-hmm.
to get up and feed her.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of sort of resented her. I would get like really snappy with Connor. He could do, the slightest thing wrong. Like, I mean, he was 2 years old. So, like, he would just do regular toddler tantrumy things, and I would be slamming doors and screaming. And, I just couldn't control the anger that I had inside of me. So, that was originally why I went to the doctor, not really because I was feeling depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out, if anyone's listening, that anger is actually a symptom of both depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was just a really, really awful, scary, dark time, in a time where I thought would be this beautiful time in my life. I had the boy and the girl, the $1 million family and my
Mm-hmm.
wonderful husband, and it was none of those things the second time around.
Yeah. How old are your kids now?
3 and 5.
Okay. Okay, so this is still like it's not so far away, like right,
Totally not.
like as you're talking. My kids are 4 and 2, and I have my own story that I won't get into now. But it's like hearing you talk. I'm right there. Like I can put myself in that newborn phase with a toddler and being so mad about it. Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I think like you were saying, having these expectations, and at one point you were like, I just don't even know what I thought. And I've come to sort of think about it like I'm not sure what I thought, but at the end of the day, we are mom. And so I was going about it in this kind of like headstrong, like I'll just do what I have to do. I'll just get it done. And you don't think about how, yes, you still get it done. Yes, your kids are still alive and they're fed and they're bathed, but you're miserable.
Mhm.
And that's like the piece that I didn't think about. And it sounds like you didn't either. It's like, no matter what, it's like, even throughout the pandemic when people would say, oh my gosh, you're home with kids. Like, I don't know how you do it. It's like, I do it because I have to. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that the impact isn't that I'm happy about it. I'm miserable about it,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's like something that is so not spoken about enough, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so many moms still feel as though if they say that out loud, then that like somehow makes them a bad mom, or
Yeah.
like, people are going to look down on them to say, well, I did it myself and I know better. Like, I know that these things happen. I've struggled with like anxiety my whole life. Like mental health is not something that's new to me. I knew
Mm-hmm.
all of the red flags, but I was still sitting in that shame cycle of like I can't tell anyone because they're just going to think I'm a bad mom, and like that is so not true.
Yeah.
But it feels that way for sure.
Yeah. Well, and you're also, if, well, I'll speak for myself. I think the initial battle is battling yourself. Like, am I a bad mom?
Yeah.
Am I doing the right thing? Can I hack this? It's hard enough to tell other people, but for me, in hindsight, what I recognized was that it was probably hardest to admit it to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I would totally agree. And I've even had moments where, especially at the, in the summer of 2020 when I started my podcast, I would start like talking about my experience, and then there would be moments where I was like, I could say, whatever, but I would hold back because I was still stuck in like, the battle between myself. Like, I don't really want to say that because
Mm,
then this person on the podcast might think I'm a bad mom. But
yeah.
then when I started to say them and I realized how many other moms feel the same way as me, and all of a sudden, like, my secret was out or something, and I didn't have to battle myself anymore because the secret's out, and, Amanda's a bad mom, if that's what we're going to think.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah,
Okay. You got me. Like, my kids are healthy and happy, but I'm a bad mom, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I am definitely a terrible, terrible
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah. So go back. What did, how else did the postpartum depression, rage, how did it show up for you? I think it's important for people to hear this, some of the specifics, some of the examples, because it is hard to sort of self-diagnose based on the internet, and I don't know what your experience was, but most women I talk to, we go to the OB, we go to the pediatrician after, give you a piece of paper, you check off some boxes, and as long as you're really not a threat to yourself or your kid, they send you on your way. So it's kind of up to us to help each other navigate that postpartum time, and in determining what anxiety, depression, and rage can look like. And I'll I'll just sort of put this out there as well. Neither of us are speaking as medical professionals.
Mhm.
I'm just simply asking you to share your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for saying that because sometimes, you never want, well, I'm speaking solely from experience.
Yes.
However, I think your experiences are really powerful, right? I think they
Mm-hmm.
can be just as powerful. Um, Anyways, we'll get into that after. But so what it looked like for me is it came on pretty strong, pretty quickly. So I was just kind of feeling this sense of like nothing. Like that was my
Mm-hmm.
first thing. Like I knew I wasn't feeling like myself, but I wasn't feeling sad. So, I was like, okay, like there's no red flag here because I'm not like crying all the time. I don't feel depressed. I just didn't really feel a whole lot of nothing. And then the whole lot of nothing kind of turned into this like dread where when Chris would get up and leave for work, I would like literally dread the entire day. Like, what was I going to do by myself with these kids all day? Like, how was I going to get through it? I tried to do everything possible that I did with Connor. Because, I mean, we all have those days, right? Where, especially when your kids are little and you haven't slept, where you're like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do with you people all day?
Mm-hmm.
But so I would do all of the things I used to do with Connor. I would get together with a friend. I would go for a walk. I would take them to the park. Scarlett was a little bit more of a difficult baby, so those things were not as easy with her as they were with Connor. And then also, again, going out of the house with two kids for me was
Yeah.
was tough.
I was gonna say it's different now that you've also added another human to the mix.
Yes, and then so when we would go out, I also noticed this heightened sense of like fear. Like I
Mm.
was constantly on edge about Scarlett and was she going to cry and was she going to like ruin our time? And that was
Mm.
like kind of the attitude was like she's ruining everything. Like I want to take Connor to say if I can think of a time when we were at the library and he really wanted to go to this little play group and I had finally like mustered up their courage to take them both
Mm-hmm.
and she just screamed the whole time and I was
Mm.
like mortified and
Mm-hmm.
in my head I couldn't put my brain to like she's a baby, she's going
Right.
to cry. It was like she's ruined our whole day.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And So that was like another just kind of like, mental check in my head. I have a really high sense of self-awareness, but as much as that can be a blessing, I also found myself kind of like, wow, you're a horrible mother. Like, why would you ever think she ruined your day? Like, she's just a baby type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started being directed at my husband. So when he would come home from work, I would just leave. I would just leave. I wouldn't talk to him. And I would like just sit in the car and stew about how he got to go to work all day. He got to talk to adults. Like, I'm not coming home for like, hours. I'm not coming home till they're in bed. I never actually did that. But I had this like, fantasy land of like I was gonna leave and I don't know where I was going.
It didn't matter.
But it didn't matter. I was out. And then I would come back and I would like nitpick him about,
Mm.
the tiniest things. Like I would, let's say I was gone like through dinner. So Chris had prepped dinner for me and him and, had fed Scarlett a bottle and then, given Connor dinner, but the dishes were a mess. I would lose my mind on him about the dishes, like
Mm.
lose my absolute mind. And it started causing like a huge shift in our marriage as well. And then I did tell you about Scarlett. Scarlett crying through the night was the big one for me. Like
Mm.
she would make me so mad. And then the only other thing was I just remember one night I was laying in Connor's bed. I actually came into his bed when he was asleep and I just laid beside him and I couldn't stop crying. And
Mm.
all I could think of was like, why did I do it? Why did I have another baby? Like, why did I wreck everything? Well, she deserves a better mother than me. I should have stopped at one because it was so much easier with one, and just really like shaming myself
Mm-hmm.
as a mom. And then also, like, in a way, in that moment, like regretting having my child. And that was a big red flag for me because I knew I like didn't mean it, but at the same time, like that's how I was feeling.
Yeah.
And so literally the next day, my husband left for work. He came home and he just like said, well, the kids went to bed and he just said to me, you know, I want to talk to you. Like there's something going on with you. And I said, yeah, I know. I don't feel like myself. And he was like, you're literally the angriest person I know, and I don't know what happened,
Mm.
but like I don't want to. He didn't want to deal with it anymore. He was like kind of tired of being my punching bag.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, it was like devastating to me because all of a sudden I wasn't like just a bad mom. Now, like my husband could see all my flaws and he
Yeah.
could see all of my imperfections. And now I was a bad wife. And it
Mm-hmm.
just like crushed me. But it also obviously was the biggest blessing in disguise because he kind of just held my hand through the rest of it. And now I'm here because I hate that moms go through this. And some moms don't have a really supportive spouse. And some moms don't have supportive families. Some moms have no one but themselves. And we are not our best friends when we are in those dark moments. Like
Yeah.
we need support.
Yeah. So what was the rest? Like what from that moment, what did you do in order to be where you are now?
It did a lot, like a lot. And it's still a huge work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you feel the same way, but I've always kind of felt as though my postpartum depression, I think just kind of morphed into regular depression.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I still struggle with anger. I still have a very short fuse. It's something like I have to really focus on, and that just comes from the anxiety and the depression that, I think for a long time I didn't think I had, but I definitely do.
And
Um,
are you saying that that is intensified now after going through postpartum?
it's a lot better now, but it is something that still like rears its ugly head. Like
Uh,
generally my go-to symptom is like anger.
okay. I'm sorry. I meant versus before you were pregnant.
Oh,
Like
yes, yes,
yeah, so it's
intensified for sure. I
okay.
was never angry. That was like
Yeah.
I don't feel like that was ever like a emotion. I mean, obviously I felt anger, but not. not as quickly as I can now.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I heard you say on your podcast that you feel like having postpartum depression has changed you what you think is forever.
Yeah, I do. I really,
Yeah.
really do. I feel like it changed me for the better. I really do. Like, another thing that I really love talking about is through, okay, so when you're asking about the rest,
Yeah, sorry, go
so
ahead. Go back to
I,
that.
yeah, sorry, I'm getting ahead, but
I know.
it all kind of ties in. However, so I went to therapy. I went for a year long of therapy, and I was like terrified to let go after that, but it was, we just talked, like I just, spilled out all of my fears.
Mhm.
And one interesting thing, which kind of leads me into where I am now, is as I was in therapy and I learned about anger and where it's coming from, I also had to pinpoint for her like different areas, like where is the anger, when is it showing up?
Mhm.
So we talked about, with Connor, it was showing up like he would make me so angry if he was misbehaving. He would make me so angry if he was, tantruming. He would make me so angry if, he pulled the silly like I want a blue cup, not a red cup, and now
Oh,
I want a purple cup
oh my
stuff.
God, I can't deal with that.
Right, which is super frustrating. I'm not downplaying how frustrating
Yes,
it is,
I
but
know.
he like would get his head ripped off. I'd be
Yeah.
like, "You're lying to me, and why are you doing this to me?" And it was like such a
Mm.
big deal. Which, don't get me wrong, it is a very big deal sometimes.
Yes, but your distinction is well made. That
Yes,
it's not just this is annoying, I'm frustrated. It's you're actually expressing to him as at all of your frustration and your rage, really.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so and same with Scarlett, when it was mostly just like when she was crying, when she was needy, because I don't even really like to call her needy now, but like in comparison to Connor, Connor was a super chill baby. Scarlett was very like needy. She wanted to be held so much. She wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be with me all the time. And through these things, through therapy, I learned that those are actually some of my own childhood traumas that are coming out, which I literally find this the most fascinating thing. But sometimes when you were a child, like myself, and I was not allowed to express emotion, my parents didn't allow me to cry. We were always kind of stiffen up the upper lip kind of a family, and still very much are.
Mm-hmm.
And only babies cry, you're a big girl, all of those types of conversations. So when my children like whine and cry and have big emotions,
Mm-hmm.
it actually triggers my inner child that never got to do those things. So instantly I'm feeling like frustrated and angry because you guys are wrong. You're bad. You're not supposed to do those things. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't what we do. This isn't how we communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So working through that was, it
Fun.
was a lot. It was fun. Yeah. And I think there's so much to be said about all of that, right? Because I think some of us can, like myself, like I didn't have anything really awful happen to me as a
Yeah.
child. I would never be in a million years think I'd be sitting here telling someone that I've had childhood traumas, because that sounds so, it sounds like such a big deal. And I really, for the most part, had a really great childhood, but I never knew that not being able to express your emotions is a childhood, it's a childhood trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
so my children were like, here is all the stuff you've ever been through on a shiny silver platter, and we're
I
going to
know.
let everybody see it.
I know. It's brutal.
It's so brutal. And it's
Yeah.
like still to this minute. So now I'm like, I always feel like I'm like trying to parent and I have no idea. Like, I know we all have no idea what we're doing, but I legit have no idea because I'm trying to be a parent that I never had.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to gentle parent, and it's really, really hard.
Yeah. I know. You know
Really hard.
what? Yeah, and you know what? I'm like now I'm almost triggered by the term gentle parenting because
I know. I
like at
know.
first I was all about it and into it and learning about it and still am, don't get me wrong, but now it's also become one of those words that's just like a buzzy word too,
Yes.
and when you're feeling ragey and you're feeling frustrated, it is so hard to look at your toddler who's screaming at you over an orange cup and go, I hear that you want the red cup. Da, da, da. It's like, oh my God, I want to scream back.
Yes.
I don't want to be gentle.
No, and it's like such a crazy thing because you scream back and you feel so good in like the second, and then literally 30 seconds later, you're like,
Oh, not
wow,
even.
that's
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah, like
Yeah.
3 seconds.
Yeah,
Let's get real. It's
you're
3.
looking at your kid's face and you're like, wow, I
hmm
did that.
hmm
And
Yep,
it
and then
never
everybody's
helps.
crying.
Honestly, you feel like crap and it never helps because then they're scared that you're so mad and it's silly. It really is because it never works and everybody just feels worse. But, we're human, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly it. We
We
are
are.
just human. Like we're all trying to figure it out. And yes, I agree the gentle parenting thing is kind of a buzzword, but like also remember if you're trying to practice some form of gentle parenting and you still yell and scream at your kid, that's okay. You can
Yeah.
try again you
Yeah.
can try again the next
Yeah.
time. Like
It's a
I still yell and
practice.
scream at
Yeah.
them sometimes. It's called being human, being a
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah. All
The
right.
parents that say they don't yell are lying.
Yeah. I know. Even if it's into a pillow at night.
That's right.
Yeah. So, all right. So therapy, and I'm a big, I love therapy. I live for
So
therapy. Um, were there other things outside of therapy that you started to implement? Anything within your house or within your marriage or just for yourself that have really helped you continue to work through those periods of depression or rage or anxiety?
yeah, the biggest one for me has been boundaries.
Mm.
That was a huge one for me. I also have learned through all of this that, I'm totally recovering perfectionist, recovering people pleaser,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things. And I would say in the last year, I've really taken the reins on I'm going to do what's best for me and my family and really stuck to that. However, it was very hard to do that at the beginning, but I now can say no to things. And that's like one thing that I always recommend people do if they want to feel like maybe better. Like
Mm-hmm.
I started saying no to certain things. Like for example, Connor got invited to a birthday party. It was at like a trampoline park, and Scarlett has we have a trampoline here. She hates it. Absolutely hates the trampoline. She wasn't invited to the party, but I am alone with my kids on the weekends because my husband works. So
Mm-hmm.
the mom had said to me, absolutely bring Scarlett. Like she's invited, like not really, but kind of because she knew I had to bring her.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I got my mom to watch her because I knew I was just kind of going to set myself up for a not so much fun time because I knew she wasn't going to have a good time. This isn't really a boundary thing, but I just stopped making myself feel bad for things like that.
Yeah.
Scarlett had a great day with my mom. Connor had a great day with his friends, and I got to sit down and talk to a couple of moms.
Yeah.
Or when people make comments at me, oh, you let your kids have screen time or eat junk food or whatever it may be, like I just kind of respond with, yeah, like, I'm okay with that. And I am okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so just kind of like boundarying and saying no to things that maybe I don't actually want to go to or because I feel like I have to, but I know my kids are going to cause me a lot of stress and anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
maybe some rage
Yeah.
if it's, to a degree. But, there's just a lot of things where I've learned that maybe it's just not worth it, or maybe it's just not what's best for me and my family in that moment or for that day. And I've really focused on myself, Chris, and my kids and thought, like, does this fit the life that we're trying to live? And does this fit in with what we're trying to do? And if it doesn't, then I just say no.
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done, but
Yeah.
now I've done it so many times that I'm like, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah. But that trampoline example is such a good one because it is so simple in context, right? Like
hmm
I I totally get that. And what I was thinking as you were talking is sort of this idea that moms have to be these great martyrs and you know I'm sure there was a time maybe earlier in your motherhood journey, or other moms, or even myself, I'll say, that I would have felt like I needed to push through and bring my Scarlett to the trampoline park instead of asking for the help. And you know what? If I'm just like picturing myself listening to this conversation before having kids and thinking, what are these people talking about? Like, just,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Just get a babysitter. I don't get it, But there is, I don't know what happens to us. It's like our brains get like, I don't know what happens, but all of a sudden it gets very hard to even ask your own mother to take a kid off your hands for a couple of hours, because taking that kid wherever you need to go is going to be brutal. I can remember times where I even had like doctor's appointments, and I wouldn't want to, quote unquote, trouble anyone. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'd bring my toddler to these doctor's appointments. And I actually can recall I needed to like have a minor surgery. I didn't have to go under anesthesia. It could be done right in the office. And I asked the doctor if I could bring my kid. And he was like, I really don't think you want to do that. And like, it just, I don't know, your brain gets like just hijacked. It's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
But I really get that. I really relate to that example. It's because it happens all the time.
It does.
I'm constantly assessing, can we get through this moment? Can we survive this moment? And having to really force myself to say, is it necessary to survive? Or
Mm-hmm.
can I ask for help?
Yeah, and asking for help is probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. It's like your brain gets hijacked, because I don't think pre-kids, like I just would have, yeah, been like, get a babysitter, or, you know, can you drive me here, or whatever. Like I never had any problem saying like I need help, but all of a sudden, like I haven't slept in 3 days and I'm like scared to ask someone to come watch a baby for an hour
Right.
so I could maybe like not die.
Right. Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's that idea of capacity versus capability. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we're all capable of pushing through. We're all capable. We're moms. It's just we're wired to get stuff done. But it's having the mental, emotional, physical capacity is different, especially when you do have at least one person there to support you.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know, like that's another thing that I've really been focusing on, and I sometimes can get a little bit of negativity for saying this, but now what I've learned is I can and should, and most of us, well, this will be hard to swallow, but I need to put myself before my children. I have to come first
Yeah.
and foremost. And I feel like that sounds like this awful thing, because that's just not what we've been bred to believe. But like, if I enter a parenting situation with an empty cup, I am half the parent I could be.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just factual information. Like I find if I have, you know, I make it a point of like tomorrow I work from home and one goes to school and the other one goes to daycare and my husband is at work. And I just need you to know that I have the most energy Friday evenings to do whatever my kids want to do, because I have been in the silence.
Mm-hmm.
I got work done. I've been able to accomplish things. I cleaned up around the house.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my cup is full, or I honestly just take days off here and there, and I will literally get in the car and drive like an hour away to like a really small town, have lunch by myself,
Mm-hmm.
just do my own thing for a day where I know Scarlett's at daycare, Connor's at school, and Chris is at work. And so, I also don't feel like I'm really letting anybody down in that way. So
Right.
maybe that's a little bit of
Right.
a downfall for me.
Hey,
But
but
like also,
but you're doing it.
yeah, and I just kind of need to recharge my own batteries. And since I've been doing that and putting myself first, I realize honestly in the last 6 months I have become 5 times the mom I think I used to be.
Mm,
And I'm so much more present and I'm so much more involved. And I think it's because I genuinely feel like my cup is pretty full
yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to feel guilty for that. And I think my kids notice it.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about, where does Chris sit with all of this? What did those conversations look like when you really started to figure out that you needed to make
yourself your first priority? And is he like, hey, you're great that you're having this great lunch, but I'm still off at work? Like, what's that dynamic like between the two of you? If you don't
So,
mind me asking.
yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. So, my husband, I have to say, is probably the most supportive person I've ever had in my whole life.
Mm,
But he sees it for what it is. So he knows that's just how I function. That's just kind of who I am. I think I've always thought I was really extroverted, but turns out I think I'm very introverted because I do like to spend a lot of time by myself.
mm-hmm,
And I just have to voice what I need to him. So something that he's always told me is he's not a mind reader. So
mm-hmm,
when I would get frustrated, and still to this day, get frustrated with him for things, I've made up in my head. Let's get real, we all do it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Or,
totally.
I'm like, oh, I hope Chris has dinner ready when I get home. And then he doesn't, and then he's in trouble because he like did something that I in my head said he was gonna do,
Right. Yeah.
but he definitely never said. So he's always made that really clear to me. Like, I'm not a mind reader. So if you need something from me, you need to voice it and you need to talk to me. So we have pretty good communication that way.
Mm-hmm,
And I really don't know how or why he is so supportive, but he just is. And I think he sees that I have been struggling and he just knows like you need to go and you need to do this.
mm-hmm,
And he has his own ways that he does too. Like he has Tuesdays free completely to himself every single Tuesday. I
mm,
kind of set up that he didn't want Scarlett to go to daycare that day, but I kind of wanted to say thank you for always being supportive to me. Like have a day to do whatever you want. So he
mm-hmm.
does, I don't know what he does, but it's the same. But he's just supportive and I think it's just because he sees it for what it is and
Mm-hmm,
he knows in the long run really and truly actually what he has said to me, if you're not happy then our whole family starts to fall apart. So I think he knows that if I am not happy because I'm feeling like I'm missing something or I'm having anxiety or I'm feeling depressed, he knows I need to fill my cup in whatever way. And
mm-hmm,
he also knows that, like, let's get real, moms really are, like, someone once told me the mom's like the CEO of the family,
mm-hmm.
and I really don't know how that isn't true
Yeah.
because once we start to fall apart, everything falls apart. Even if you have a crazy, supportive, responsible spouse that, takes on a huge amount of workload like Chris does. If he doesn't have me, he's like not he's like not able to function as a parent. I don't know. He called me the other day to ask me if Connor needs the snow pants.
I know.
So, like, we
I
talk
know.
about him like he's amazing, which he is, but he does call me
Right.
to ask if in Canada in February when it's like a minus 20 something, does he need snow pants? Like, the answer is yes.
Yes, right. Right. I know. I know.
You live in New Jersey, it's
Yeah.
cold there.
Yeah, it is. I know. I know. And if it's not snow pants, it's, where are the wipes? If the wipes thing is empty on the changing table, then he doesn't know where the rest of them are, but
Yes.
yes. And I appreciate you sharing. I think that just in my own marriage and a lot of the shows, a lot of the conversations I have with women, it's just not a transition that's talked about enough either. How your marriage really does change with the addition of new people. And it
Yes.
doesn't always look pretty at first.
No, it doesn't. And I agree with you. It's something that I've been vocal about on my podcast. I've told my husband, sorry, I'm going to kind of throw you under the bus, but like I now think like if you can make it to where like if you have multiple children, if they're like over the age of 5, then I feel like your marriage might last.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like Chris and I's marriage has been through the ringer
Mm-hmm.
since we had kids. And I think that's just normal. It's like a huge stressor. I actually did a podcast recently with a relationship expert, and that's what she called it. She called children a stressor. And I never thought about it like that
Mm-hmm.
because I think we think like, okay, we're married, we'll have the house and a baby, and we'll live happily ever after. But like pre kids, what did you have to worry about? What honestly did you have to worry about? Like, I
Yeah.
could get I could like drink all night long, and then, the only thing I had to worry about was like if I was going to decide to call in sick or not. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and now it's like you go from, honestly, even if you owned a home, me and Chris owned our own home, paid bills, worked full time, I didn't have half the responsibilities I have now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mental load. It's
Yes.
the exhaustion. It's who's more exhausted. It's, you know,
Yes, the
people.
tallying.
Oh, the tally. We still tally. I'll be honest.
Sometimes we do
tally.
too.
Yeah, we do. And then I like literally am like, Amanda, why did you just do that?
Like even this morning, even though my husband slept through it, I made a point to be like, yeah, so me and the baby had a little jam sesh at 4:30 in the morning, and it's really, if I'm honest, it's not about sharing with him for information. I'm sharing it with him so that if it happens again tonight and I wake him up, then in my mind it like justifies me being able to wake him up because I did it the night before.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. Oh
yeah.
I did it recently to my husband too. Like, it must be really nice to be able to sleep all night long, because I was up twice with both kids.
Yeah. I know. I
Just
know.
A little side swipe.
I
in our
know,
morning
and
coffee.
yeah, totally. And the thing is I think once you've really been down, right? Like once you've been to the really low, dark, heavy place with it, you can sort of be that little banter in the morning and it not be the end of the world. But in those early stages of parenthood, combined with our just, I think you've said it a bunch on your show, but sleep deprivation is no joke, and it completely alters how you think and feel about almost everything in your life. So you have sleep deprivation, you have hormones, you have dynamics and roles changing, and then just on top of it, the addition of this responsibility of this little tiny human and those little, I'll say jabs, but the little, whatever, it's like those hit really hard early on. They cut deep, and
Oh, yeah.
and you don't, I don't know. I think too, like, and I know you've talked about this, and I know I'm thinking of Renee Reina, who we've both talked to. She harps on this all the time, and rightfully so, that mom is that default parent. Like when you're talking about, before kids being able, like what responsibilities you have. It's like when you wanted to take care of yourself and go for a walk or go to lunch or do anything, you just did it. Now it's like you have to make sure that your husband didn't already make plans, or that you get that babysitter together. And somehow, at least in my house, that still tends to fall on me.
Yeah, me too. 100%. The doctor's appointments.
Yeah, all of it.
The everything. Today was crazy hair day. Like, who do you think had to get up earlier to get herself ready for work because Connor needed to have his hair done crazy?
Yeah.
And even if my husband wants to help, like, it's also frustrating because sometimes the kids just don't want him. They just want mom, and that's just the way it is. And that's another battle and then totally other podcast. But
Yeah.
it's a really hard uphill battle for a really long time. And I won't lie to you, like Chris and I still have a lot of really down moments, and you think having kids is hard enough, then add like a mental illness in there, right? Like have his wife struggle with postpartum, and then he kind of has to take the brunt of things. He kind of has to be the leader of the family because his partner is down and out. And then coming back from that, like there was a lot of resentment to me from him too. Right. So, I mean, we're getting through it and we're in a much better space, but it's really hard. It's really hard on your marriage. I'm sorry, but it is. Like everybody that's listening, I'm not trying to scare anyone out of having children, but the reality is like just having kids is hard. It's hard on I feel like it's hard in every cell of my body.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally relate to everything you said. I think that, when you have mom going through sleep deprivation and depression and all of that, I'm losing my train of thought, but I think what did I want to say about that?
I love when that happens. That's what motherhood is too.
You know what I was going to get at is that I think what's also been hard for us is not just possible resentment of having to take on, the full, like you said, lead the pack now, or potentially be a punching bag for mom who has depression or this or that. It's also what I've really struggled with is it's really, really hard to have any true understanding of what it is we're going through if your partner has not experienced a true bout of depression or a anxiety attack that incapacitates them before. Because prior to being a mom, I had never had a true bout of depression. Of course, I felt depressed or sad or anxious for moments in time, but they weren't anything that lasted or felt as intense as what I've felt now postpartum. And so I imagine someone trying to tell me that they simply cannot get out of bed, or that they actually feel rage and see red when their kid cries, and thinking to myself, wow, yeah, that must suck. And then moving on with my day. It's like you can't get it until you're in it. And so I know there have been times where I have felt like, how is this going to be okay in our relationship if I don't feel like he can really ever get the depth of my struggle?
No, I agree.
I don't know. That was like a jumbled mess of words, but
it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just hard. It's hard. Like, I don't ever want him to, and he's never said anything like this before, so this is nothing to do with him. It's like you were saying earlier, like the stories in our head. It's like, I never want him to feel like, is she just faking it? Does she just not want to give them a bath tonight? And it's like, no, I literally can't pull myself out of bed. There's a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think having someone who understands that is a huge piece to that puzzle.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, but also thankfully, my husband does understand it, and he is a very big advocate for mental health as well. So he was just kind of, he looked at it as, I was ill, right?
Yeah,
that was just it. There was no questioning it. It wasn't Amanda has depression or anything. It was just Amanda's sick.
Yeah.
And so we're going to make her better, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and thank you. I don't mean to dismiss that. I just, I'm trying to be conscious of our time here, and I want to,
totally get it.
Sort of make sure, like, a lot of what we've been talking about here is these notions, expectations that we go into motherhood with, we go into parenthood with, that are like you said, like, you get slapped in the face with reality. What do we start to do about it? Like, I always say that, moms, we can talk ourselves in circles about this, and it's beneficial for us to talk about it, but it's like, I want to help the moms that aren't moms yet, but like, how do we make them listen? Like, what do we do about all these expectations and all this that we're talking about? Do you have any ideas about that?
It's a good question. I don't. I honestly...
I don't either.
I don't know. In my because I try and put myself back in my shoes of like pre-kid Amanda, and like pre-kid Amanda did not care what you had to say about your motherhood experience, because I probably just thought it was stupid.
I know.
Because I wasn't there yet.
Right.
And so but something I have done is, with several of my friends who have had babies, like while they were pregnant, most people know that I'm pretty open with my podcast and my Instagram. So some of my friends just know they can come to me and ask questions. So some of these people just asked questions, but I have just been honest and just said, if you like have a really hard time when you have this baby, it's okay. Like, and you can reach out to me. And I had one friend particularly who was very anxious about getting postpartum depression, and she asked me a lot of questions. And at first, I hemmed and hawed about telling her the truth, but I told her the truth. And I think that's what's most important to me. And that's why I have my podcast, and why I talk on other people's podcasts like yours, and like why I do everything I do on Instagram, because I hate that so many moms feel the way that I felt. I hate that nobody told me certain things. Like, no one told me what I can't think of a specific. I could think of 100 actually,
I
but just
mean,
like
even the
nobody
postpartum
told.
rage, like no one told me that
Nobody
was a
talks
thing.
about that.
Yeah,
Nobody talks about that.
right.
Nobody talks about it. And you either have postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression, and I didn't check either box. So, and then, when I had told somebody how I was feeling, especially when I shared with you that, I was feeling very regretful of having another child.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally got brave enough to share that with someone, they said to me, "How could you say such a horrible thing?"
Mm,
And I like put my
yeah,
head in the sand and
that's
was like,
not
I'm never gonna
helpful.
say
Yeah.
no. But I just I hope when people come to me or when I say things, I think, I might scare them,
Mm,
but I just want them to know that like when you get there, because you will, not everybody's gonna struggle with their mental health, but every one of us struggles with that sleep deprivation. Every one of us goes through that whole like, wow, what did I do?
yeah. Yeah.
Every one of us is like, this isn't what I expected
Mm-hmm.
at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I just hope that, my words can go in and be like, oh, okay, well, Amanda did say this could happen. So, like,
Yeah.
this is normal. Or know that, I'm here for you. If you need me, I'm here. And, like, I am just a person you can vent to.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe I'll throw in a load of laundry.
Right. 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 Yeah.
But just I agree with you. I wish there was a way that we could help people before they have kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you do that though. Like I feel like you remember in school when you would do like the whole I don't know, some people did like an egg, but we did like the crying baby. Like we had
Mm-hmm.
to take it home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like that's so not a thing. That's not a thing. Like we should talk more about emotional health. Right?
It's like I can't even believe we did that stuff.
I turned it off. I figured out how to turn it off. And if I had to take the egg home, I probably just would have thrown it up against the wall. Like, we don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. I know.
So that's why I'm like, could you help someone who's not even in the realm of motherhood yet? I don't know. I don't know if they would listen, but I do try and talk to people that I know at least. I won't go and talk to a pregnant person on the street. Like, do you know what you're
Right.
getting yourself into? This is going to be
Right.
problems.
Right. Right. But your point is well made. I mean, even as kids, I think, that if generally though, as a society, we were making more of an effort to teach children about emotions and how to regulate their emotions and to really be in tune with what they're feeling and have everything kind of full circle conversation here, having emotions be okay and talked about, then we would indirectly be setting them up to be better prepared for getting slapped in the face with motherhood.
Yes, I 100% agree. And that's kind of just where I stand with it now. I'm just trying to prepare people for motherhood. I try and talk openly about emotions with my kids because the likelihood of them struggling with their emotions at some point in the world that we live in, like it's
Yeah,
there,
pretty
right?
high. Pretty
It's
high. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty good. It's
Yeah.
like 99% gonna
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, so I agree with you. If we can teach our children and then they grow into these adults who are open about their emotions, then maybe when they have children, they'll know, okay, oh, I remember my mom talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can go to their physician or go to me or go to a friend and be like, I'm feeling really sad. I'm really struggling. Like, can you talk to me about this? Because it won't be this weird taboo conversation where it's like, oh, you're a bad mom, you're depressed, like what do you want to kill your children? Like no.
Right.
No.
Right.
Let's have like an actual conversation. I think that could really help.
Yeah. And then just as far as the podcast, just you know, I know as a host myself, I pretty much am in love with every conversation because I take something away from it. But I wonder, are there any podcasts of yours that are particularly impactful or that come to mind right away that just made you think about something or that really stick out to you?
Like ones that I've done on my own show.
Yeah, like any of your guests or conversations that were like, whoa, that rocked my world.
Yeah, I actually did one very, very recently with a very good friend of mine. Her name is Nikki. And we just talked about mental health in general, but she went through a bit of a messy divorce, and I have not been through a divorce. However, she was talking a lot about just being so unhappy and kind of finally choosing herself.
Mm.
And that was a huge moment for me because that actually was like almost 6 months ago. And that's when I really started realizing like I don't choose myself enough. And that's when I've been forcing myself to be, my first priority. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
every day is different. If, somebody's sick, I'm not going to say, okay, you can just be sick because I need to do my thing first.
Right.
But,
Right.
um,
Right. Yeah.
but it was
Yeah.
so impactful for me. And she actually brought me to tears because her talking about how much she was struggling made me kind of realize at the time how much I was struggling and how I was putting everybody's needs before my own and how ridiculous that really is,
Mm-hmm.
and how I was burning myself out and just pushing myself into depression because I think that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we got off the call and we just ended up talking for like an hour after that. And I told her that it's just that this conversation was so impactful for me, even though I'm not going through a divorce. And she was talking about a divorce. It like just hit home for what I was going through at the time. And it's been like the thought in my head all the time, like you need to choose yourself over and over and over again. And that is 100% okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're not okay, your kids aren't okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a big one for me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna go listen to that.
It's a good one.
And probably
She's
cry.
a good
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah. No,
She may make you cry. She made me cry, and
Yeah.
it's just very real and raw, and there's something beautiful about when people are so real and raw.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I always say it, but we have to sometimes hear the same thing over and over and over again, just said by a different person and in a slightly different way until it finally sinks in.
Yeah.
You know? And it's that because how many times are we scrolling on social and just having conversations where women and moms are saying, put yourself first, self-care, take care of yourself, and it's just they're just words until you actually let it sink in and do something about it.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's exactly what happened with this podcast. It was just like, it was like she said it and it was like the first time I'd ever heard it,
Yeah, yes. Well, Amanda, is there anything else that you would have wanted to make sure that you said today or talked about today, or anything that I should have asked you and didn't? Anything come to mind?
No, this has been such a great conversation, and I hope that if there is a mom listening, we have not scared you.
Yes. Well, maybe.
But I don't, you know what? I want to scare you a little bit.
Yeah, just a little. Just a little.
But also just made you feel seen and heard and validated and understand that you're not alone. And that's it. We're all just one giant village.
Yep. And you know what? The only other thing that comes to mind, I would normally just like say mic drop and end it, but I'm just, something that always strikes me about these kind of conversations is how somewhat easily you and I are able to say words like depression and rage and talk about struggles in our marriage. And I just want to make sure that we say that you're not alone, and that you also may not be in a place where you can talk as candidly as we can, but you'll get there,
100%. I couldn't even tell anybody a year ago about, feeling regretful after I had Scarlett. I was not talking about it on my podcast. And the day I talked about it, I like wanted to throw up like 85 times before I actually published the episode. And once it was another thing, I know we're ending, but when you do become candidly to speak, I heard the Birds Papaya say once, the moment you speak your secret, it doesn't have any more power.
Yeah.
And that was pretty powerful one, because as soon as you start talking about your feelings, they won't feel so heavy anymore.
Right. It takes some of the shame away, and the yeah. Yes, okay. Well, Amanda, in an effort to not sit here until midnight, I will say thank you for your time. This was wonderful, and I look forward to seeing what else you do in this world for us moms.
Thank you. I cannot wait to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for allowing me to use your platform and have this conversation.
So validating, right? Amanda is the queen of seeing and hearing all of us moms, and I'm so grateful to know her. So I interviewed Amanda, which you just listened to, and then Amanda interviewed me, which go check it out on her podcast. It aired on May 9th, 2022. And it's really something when the first two conversations you have with a person are these hour-plus deep dives into our hardest moments. You really get to know someone and feel a deep bond that, in this case, I know will stick. I can't tell you how much I appreciate Amanda sharing the specifics of some of her most intrusive thoughts and the challenges in her marriage, because I know how hard it is to put yourself, your kids, and your relationship out there for public consumption. And all I can say is, Amanda, what you're doing matters. Women need to hear these stories and know they're not alone. And you know, the one thing that came to mind as I listened to this conversation in the editing process was around the portion of the conversation where Amanda was sharing how she's, unfortunately been met with the "how could you ever say such a horrible thing" response when she shared her feelings of regret of having a second child. And I just want to say to anyone whose instinct is to respond that way to a mom or a woman or really anyone sharing something really painful, is that no one feels worse for thinking it than the person saying it. We don't share tough thoughts like that because we're proud of them. We don't share them to be boastful. We share them because they are painful, we have guilt, and our own immense level of shame. So, we don't need it from you too, you know? Yeah. And I've said this before in interviews that I've done on other shows, and I really just believe in the power of sharing the specifics and sharing the details because, we all become parents for the first time. We all get married for the first time. We're all doing this stuff for the first time. And at least in my experience, it's taken me actually hearing from other women talk about the specifics to recognize in myself what was happening. So I had to hear women talk about the specifics of their postpartum depression to go, oh, I think that's what I have. Because you're going to look online and you're going to see all of these very generic, symptoms, and you're going to talk to your doctor and they're going to be trying to decipher what's really going on. And so it is other women that we need to look to and hear from to see ourselves in those stories. So anyway, please go listen to Amanda's podcast, Honest as a Mother. Check out her social media and get excited because she's got a book in the works and I can't wait to read it. All right, that's it. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.